One of Britain's most iconic sporting events, the Wimbledon tennis tournament, is replacing all 300 of its line judges with artificial intelligence. Will this improve tennis, or is this an overuse of AI? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, after 147 years of human intelligence judging the tennis court line of Wimbledon, artificial intelligence is taking over. The Australian and US Open tournaments already use this technology, but is this a step too far for British tennis tradition?
This iconic sound of Wimbledon tennis will no longer be ringing in its courts as of next year, as 300 line judges are being replaced with artificial intelligence for the Wimbledon Championships. The sight of finely dressed line judges crouching and standing at the side and back of the grass courts has been a feature of the tournament for 147 years. But it's out with tradition and in with new technology, as AI electronic line calling system, better known as Hawkeye Live, will be installed in all 18 match courts. Already a feature at the Australian and US tournaments, it's only the French Open that relies on the human eye. So why now for Britain's Wimbledon? Line judges are responsible for determining whether a tennis player's shot is in or out of the court margins, or a fault. From 2025, an AI call of out or fault will now be the final word of line calls. This technology has a reaction call of 1/10 of a second of a ball landing, and so will prevent the human error of incorrect line calls. So is Wimbledon losing tradition, or is it simply moving with the times?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining me here in the studio is Rohit Talwar. He is global futurist and the CEO of Fast Future. In Manchester in England, we have Sanny Rudravajhala, who's a sports journalist. And in Leeds in England, we have Betton, who is a British tennis coach. And in Suffolk in the United Kingdom, we have Wendy Smith. Wendy is a former line judge at Wimbledon. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Wendy, I'll come to you first. How are you feeling right now?
To be honest, personally, I'm feeling totally gutted because we were not told about this happening quite so quickly. We were aware that they were going to bring it in, but obviously we thought it might be after next year's championships and not after the one we've just had.
And tell me, Wendy, you've put your life, your soul into the sport of tennis. I mean, did you ever think you'd see the day you'd be replaced by a robot?
No, I didn't really. It was something which I think with the modern day, computers seem to be coming in every single field at the moment. And although it was spoken about coming into tennis, I never thought it would actually happen and mean that I'd be out of a job. After doing 40 years at Wimbledon, it's been part of my life for so long, I hoped it would still continue.
Calvin, just come in on that. You coach top-level players who win big tournaments, Wimbledon amongst them. How are you feeling from the coaching side of things?
I mean, it's multifaceted, really. I mean, I think the players overall think it's a good idea because they're getting absolute certainty from it. I'm not sure that is actually the case yet because there's still a 3 millimeter margin of error, I think. So when we're getting balls that when it shows up on the image is 1 millimeter out, that doesn't really tell us anything because there's a 3 millimeter margin of error. It could be 2 millimeters in. So I'm not sure it's actually ready yet, but let's say it is. I think for me as a coach, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference other than I think I get some certainty that the calls are correct. For a viewer, for a fan experience, I think it has some issues.
Sanny, from the media perspective, this is going to take away a lot of the drama of tennis, isn't it? I mean, I grew up in the 80s watching John McEnroe having big, loud, shouty, swearing matches with judges and umpires, and it was all part of the drama of tennis. It kind of made you want to watch more. And now they're taking that away.
Yeah, it's funny that, and the 1981 John McEnroe, "You cannot be serious" line was a little bit before my time, but of course, it's one of the most iconic moments in tennis, and it wasn't even a bit of play. It was a line call, wasn't it? Down a serve down the middle. So I think this is it's funny because Wimbledon, in so many ways, is quite anachronistic in how it looks. A grass court match with line judges up until now. Wimbledon will push the whole strawberries and cream and all that side of things, part of the history, the heritage, and a line judge is part of that as well. So I think it's really interesting that this is coming in, and I've been kind of wrestling with it as well, Ender. Like, sport has such high stakes, and we know just how big this is. You think from a sports point of view, and we're seeing Alcaraz at the moment do so brilliantly, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But to take away this element, does it not diminish the game a little bit, perhaps? And you're kind of right there. This has been going on. We've had this part of the sport for a very long time, and to lose it kind of feels like we're losing a little bit of what it is to have Wimbledon in the first place.
Rohit, I know you love technology and you see it as the future and it is your work in your life, but are we in danger of ending up with sport that is quite robotic? We're seeing players that are media trained, and now the actual decision-making process is being taken away from humans.
Absolutely. I think we've seen some great examples of the tech enhancing the game. So I think, when we first introduced it in tennis, for specific line calls, that was very helpful. In cricket, the decision review system has been helpful in seeing whether it was going to be an LPW or not. In football, I think the jury is still out with the VAR, trying to use AI to sort of assess whether or not someone was offside. I think in tennis, we've already seen it happening in a number of places around the world where they have introduced AI technology. Wimbledon is one of the last. And I think it's missing the point. People don't say, I want to go and watch Wimbledon to watch a bunch of robots. They want to watch brilliant tennis players. But as we've already heard, the line judges, the strawberries and cream, they're all part of the atmosphere. And it's fine that it's a throwback to 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, because it is all part of the spectacle. And just because Wimbledon can save, I don't know what it is, but I'm guessing maybe £1 million for the tournament, is nothing compared to the devaluation of the brand. Because then you just start to more and more, why don't we take away the umpire? At what point do we say we don't need the umpire? And at what point do we say, well, actually, it's cheaper to watch robots playing the game, or to have avatars of these players, or to have the best players in the world playing 12 tournaments using their AI avatars? That might be fun for a while, but it's completely diminishing the value of the human experience. So this is one of those examples, and there are many right now, where we're just throwing AI at it without really thinking about whether it's adding any value. There are lots of great places, and we've talked before about AI in pharmaceuticals, in all sorts of areas, where it can help us make good decisions, or decisions that humans just can't make with that much data. But here you really want to say, is the AI enhancing the experience here? Because this is a participation sport, it's a spectator sport. So is it enhancing the experience for either of them?
Wendy, do you think the decision here was made by an accountant? Some bean counter has sat down and thought, we can save a few quid here. But at what cost, do you think?
I don't think they've looked at the. I don't think they've looked at the behind the scenes with the line judge's view at all. I think they have looked, yes, on a monetary side of things, and also because there's our 2 Grand Slams that have gone that way already with the Australian and the US. I just felt they had to join the others and not be left behind. But I don't think they've thought about the actual atmosphere and what they're going to lose by doing it.
And just tell me, when you're working at Wimbledon and you're so in the zone, you're concentrating, how much pride do you take in getting those decisions correct?
Oh, there's a big pride. It's something which you don't want to have the situation when they challenge your call with the old Hawkeye system. You pride yourself in getting through a match with correct calls. That's what we work all year for. We don't go out there expecting to make a mistake. Yes, we do make mistakes. We're human, but they're not usually by a huge distance. It could be a millimetre or two, but then it could work the other way as well. And like the gentleman said earlier, there's a 3 millimetre error. Well, that's the same with a human.
Well, let's bring Calvin back in on that. Calvin, this whole issue, I mean, the human touch is very important in sport, isn't it? Players go out, they know who the umpire is, they'll see the line judges, they may build a rapport, and they know that ultimately nobody's out there doing them down. It's people are just trying their absolute best, but the human touch is very important in sport.
I mean, it is to a degree. I think we're in danger of over-egging that a little bit, though. I'm not sure that not having line judges makes that much of a difference to the people watching it. I think it's more that, for me, that the issue for the people watching it is you don't get the visual. So when the Hawkeye calls the ball, it just makes a sound. Now, as a coach and as somebody who watches tennis, only when you've experienced that do you realise how important it is that the line judges also put their arms out, because that's often what you see first. So if the ball's out, they put their arms out. If the ball's in, they put their hands down. And so you kind of lose that visual. And what I'm sort of concerned with the technology more than that, and I think I will stress that I think there's benefits to using the technology. Again, it means once they iron out the margin of error, it means you're getting the right decision all the time. And if you've got a line judge, you can say that you can challenge it on Hawkeye, but a lot of the time that point then has to be replayed when you've already won the point. I know one of the teams that I coach earlier in the year, they basically lost a match because an umpire overruled a line judge on a call that was later shown on the Hawkeye to have been the correct initial call. So that cost them a lot of ranking points and a lot of money because an umpire, not a line judge, has overruled it.
So Calvin, you trust the technology, yeah?
I think you have to. I don't know enough about it, but I know that the people who work in it implicitly trust it. I don't think, it does still baffle me, this margin of error thing, a little bit on the close calls, but that's only on ones that are less than 3 millimetres. But I have to imagine that the way the technology have gone, that will disappear soon enough. I think one of the issues that we're going to have, if I can say this now, particularly at Wimbledon, because let's not stress as well, Wimbledon's going to be the last tournament to do this. All the other tournaments are doing it next year. That it's not Wimbledon has made a move to do it before anyone else. The whole tour, other than Wimbledon, I think maybe the French Open, have agreed to do this already for next year going forward. For anybody who's been at any of the tournaments where this is happening, when the ball is called out, you have a stock noise, a recorded noise from a line judge saying out. If the courts are too close together, you've basically got the same call of out on all the courts. So we had a situation just a couple of weeks ago in China where the lads who I coach were playing. One of my lads served, and right at the moment that the ball landed from his serve, on the next court came a call of out. And all 4 players stopped because they thought that was out on our court. And that to me is going to be a problem, particularly at Wimbledon, because the courts at Wimbledon are closer to each other. About half the courts are closer to each other than any other tennis tournament in the world. And I think that is going to be I can see that being a problem more than anything else.
Sanny, from the spectator point of view, I mean, sport gets huge audiences, Wimbledon in particular. The advertising revenue that comes in, the ticket sales, people want to see drama, don't they? So if we're putting robots in charge, we're ending up with quite a sterile product, are we not?
Well, I suppose people also want to see sporting integrity in what they're watching, right? So to put the shoe on the other foot, that's kind of where the technology coming in is what you want, right? Because otherwise, let's say you're a spectator, you paid so much money to have centre court tickets, you want to know that the match you're watching and the calls that you're seeing happening are exactly as they should be. And the argument is, the theory is, well, if it saves the All England club X amount per year, and the technology is essentially infallible, bar a margin of error that's relatively equivalent to a human, then it's win-win, right? If they're going to be consistent and very fast at doing it. But yeah, of course, it's all part of a spectacle, isn't it? Sport is a spectacle. Sport is entertainment. Sport is showbiz. At the end of the day, it's the thing that can put a smile on your face no matter what's going on in the rest of your life and the rest of the world. So removing elements that make that human drama happen, I think actually does diminish it. And yeah, okay, you don't need line judges in the same way that you maybe don't need other elements in sport that kind of add to the spectacle. One could argue, therefore, but then how much are you taking away from the sport as a whole? So it's a real fine balancing act. And the thing about Wimbledon, of course, is it's this sense of tradition and history, this prestige, this huge thing. It's coming in all ATP events everywhere apart from the French Open, as we've mentioned. But all those Grand Slams have their own unique identifiers. And will you be able to tell the difference between Melbourne and the US Open, for example, if there's nothing really kind of discerning them? What's the difference between that and an ATP event in China or anywhere else? Wimbledon is in itself an entity that has markers that make it distinct from everything else, and the drama's all there, but it's all part of it as well. So yeah, it's very complex, and I'm not sure how far that element has really been dug into by those in charge.
Rohit, I think one part of all of this that made the headlines is just the fact that it's Wimbledon, because it's such an old institution and we know what to expect. British traditions, it's the best of English sport. It's an iconic venue. Are you surprised that the powers that be decided that next year is the year we will bring in AI and get rid of all these brilliant people like Wendy, who've served us so well for so long?
I think, as we've heard, it's a sort of evolution in management right now, isn't it? This idea that we need to be seen to be more modern, however old the institution, we need to be seen to be embracing innovation and technology. And maybe the people in charge haven't taken a big enough step back to say, what is Wimbledon? They're using marketing language, and what is the product? And not really understood the complete sort of package that Wimbledon is. And not ask themselves, well, would we lose anything if we didn't have the technology? This isn't one of those areas where it's life or death, that if we didn't have the technology, we couldn't diagnose this condition and the patient might die. This is just saying we might get some calls right that should have been out, if you like. We called them in, they should have been out, or in and they were out. And maybe a player doesn't win. Maybe a player doesn't win quite as much money. It's not the end of the world to the other 99.999% of people. And it's been there for 150 plus years. People have coped with the fact that they might have had the odd bad decision. So I think for me, it's odd for someone who's a sort of tech evangelist and a futurist to be saying this, but it's one of those areas where we just need to step back and use a little bit more judgment. It might enhance it a little bit for the player, but this feels like it's all really driven by finances.
Wendy, how will you feel next summer when the time comes and you should be getting on a train to London, you should be packing your lovely, neat line judge's uniform in a bag and heading off to see the best tennis players in the world, and ultimately you're going to be watching it on TV like the rest of us?
I'm going to be lost, to be honest, because obviously, as I said, for 40 odd years it's been my routine. It's going to be very strange being at home for those 2 weeks and actually having to watch it on the telly rather than watching everything live. It's going to be a very weird feeling, I must say.
I really feel for you, Wendy. I mean, 40 years is a long, long time to be going somewhere, working so hard. And I'm guessing, forgive me for asking, but do you get paid? Do line judges get paid, or expenses only? What is it?
For Wimbledon, they get paid a fee and expenses, but all the other events where we went to obviously qualify to get to Wimbledon, we have to do other tournaments as well. It's not just Wimbledon. I give up about, I know it's not a lot, 5 weeks of my time in order to keep the grade and go to Wimbledon. But until just recently, those tournaments were just paid expenses, which barely covered the accommodation and your travelling to and from. But they have rectified that in the last couple of years. But over the 40 years of obviously Wimbledon paid for all the other the money I got with Wimbledon covered the losses I made at the other events. So, and then again, you try to find accommodation in Wimbledon during Wimbledon fortnight, you're looking at quite a lot of money.
Calvin, how do you feel hearing that from Wendy, that, 40 years in your sport, volunteering, giving her time, and next summer just feeling completely bereft and lost, in her words.
I mean, I'm sympathetic and I'm empathetic of it. I'm kind of not as outraged as everyone else seems to be, purely because it was inevitable. It was going to happen. All the other tournaments are doing it. There would have come to a point where the governing body would have just said to Wimbledon eventually, it might not have been this year, it might be next year, look, you have to have this. The players want it, the authorities want it, it was going to happen, and the world moves on. We can't just keep having it there because we say, oh, strawberries and cream and line judges. That's not really a rationale for getting decisions wrong and that kind of thing. I also don't really buy the drama element, and because if you watch a tennis match, there's only really arguments about line calls in about maybe 1 in every 10 tennis matches, and it's usually a pretty small argument. You're still getting the drama. We had 3 arguments last week in China, 3 big instances in China last week with umpires and players about the time violations. So you're still getting all that. I don't think you can keep line judges in on the premise of, oh, well, one of them might get it wrong sometimes and the player will have an argument with the umpire about it. I don't really think in a sporting integrity point of view that really holds up.
Sanny, progress, I guess, to quote Scalvin there, it's inevitable. This was always going to happen. It was just a matter of time.
You know, Calvin is right to an extent. I would say that Wimbledon is one of the few sporting institutions that can actually toe a different line and hold their own and have a unique kind of position, in the same way that the French Open appears to be doing exactly that. You know, I don't know how the technology kind of works with judging it on clay. Seemingly it's absolutely fine to do so, but French Open have decided not to go with this technology, and it gives them a market that keeps them out, steps them out from everyone else. What I would also say is, you know, I'd be fascinated to know what Wendy's work has involved outside of just judging the line on a day-to-day. You know, there's the ball girls and ball boys, who are they interacting with? I'm sure the line judges are there and a part of this sport. And also these you know, judges, these officials have been involved in the sport for a long time, and they feed, as we've heard, the grassroots of the whole sport. If you were to take away that pillar, how much of an impact does it then knock on for the sport in this country? Are we losing a huge amount of potential volunteers who get into the sport, maybe to one day to become an official or a judge, and we lose them? Do we lose a whole pillar that therefore don't have a carrot of potentially qualifying to get to Wimbledon to then be involved in? But yeah, of course, is it inevitable? In a lot of ways, yes. I think Wimbledon's one of the few things out there that actually could toe a different path and be okay, as opposed to the rest of the ATP Tour, for example.
Well, let's just ask Wendy about that. Wendy, that's an awful lot of experience that they're waving goodbye to, isn't it? And I'm guessing you're the kind of person, if a younger line judge was asking for your experience or your wisdom, you pass it on.
Oh yeah, you can't do anything. You can't teach experience. You obviously get it. And going back to Wimbledon being out on their own, it wasn't until recently they actually did the seedings by the world rankings rather than on what they wanted to go with. And so it's only the world rankings have only come in for the true seedings at Wimbledon just recently. So Wimbledon has always had a bit different to the others. Going back to losing the experience, I think that is a very fair point, because personally for me, all my work I do leads up to as the cream on the top of the cake, really, to get to Wimbledon. So to actually say, no Wimbledon, I'm now thinking, well, do I want to continue? And I'm not the only one. There's several of us doing that as well. And therefore, like was said, the grassroots are going to lose out, because people aren't going to be willing to give up all their time voluntary for no carrot at the end.
Really sorry to hear that, Wendy. One final point from Rohit. Rohit, where does this end? I mean, a few years down the line, are we going to see AI umpires?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure right now there are people testing them to see how many of the decisions they could get right. But I think you'll see it in more and more sports. You'll see more and more of the officials either being augmented with AI or being replaced by them. And then you'll see a pushback at some point. The fans will say, actually, this has detracted from our experience. And even the players will say, actually, it's not quite the same experience. But I think you'll see it in all society. It's a microcosm of what we're seeing across society, where AI will be penetrating more and more of our roles. And the challenge for all of us is to understand it more so that we can make more informed choices about our own lives and how AI might impact us.
Rohit, thank you very much for your insight on this, and to Sanny and Calvin as well. And Wendy, we wish you the very best of luck with your tennis next year, whatever you decide to do. Thank you all. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit subscribe. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.